Hello and welcome to this conclusion to an online course on K through 12 education as we understand it and teach it and practice it here at Hillsdale College. I'm Larry Arnn and I work here at the college. I said in the introduction to this that there are levels of things to know, that the things in nature are arranged in a hierarchy pointing up towards some ultimate things, and I'm going to tell you what I understand to be the way those things can be understood in K through 12 education. A good way to think about education is that it comes in two parts. One part is basic, and basic divides into two parts. One part of that is the skills and knowledge that permit one to function as a human being. Human beings have two kinds of virtues, say the classics, virtues of character and virtues of thinking. And so to practice those virtues of thinking, you have to have good skills at thinking. You have to be a well-spoken, excellent reader who is numerate, who can use numbers. Those are essential gifts to the human beings. They're something that no other creature here on earth that we see can do. You have to develop these things. You have to learn to think critically. You have to study logic. You might not call it that, but what logic is the tools of skillful thinking. So you don't make mistakes, you don't put things together wrong, you don't commit what they call in logic fallacies, and you become good at putting things together and reaching the right conclusion about them. The premises indicate the conclusions that you draw. This is a big thing. We're adding that to the core course at Hillsdale College so that students become more sophisticated and formal in their understanding of logic. That course was promoted especially by David Whalen, our provost, who wants it to be difficult and boring, he will say. But it's actually a great subject and not boring. There are things to know once you've got your mind working, so you know how it's supposed to function. There are basic subjects: history, literature, mathematics, the natural sciences. You have to know something about what's really a moral virtue, but it has something that's the most public of the moral virtues. You have to understand about justice, which has to do with how you treat others and includes the subject of freedom, the right of a person to be an independent person and live their own life. And you have to get some idea early in your education about how that works in your country, especially we here at Hillsdale argue in this country, which we regard as in principle the best of them, even the best ever. And so these are all important things in developing a mind so that it can get to a place where it can function well as a mature human being, and so that it can prepare itself to address the ultimate things that I'll talk about in a minute. There has to be some understanding of God. Hillsdale College is founded with the idea of it says civil and religious liberty, those are political subjects, and intelligent piety, that is what you can know about God. Those are inestimable blessings, and you approach them through sound learning. We've always been associated here with the Christian faith and are heavily so now. And we think we have a right to that. Sometimes we wonder if that right's going to be protected. In the public schools now, it's illegal to teach that any religion is true and others not true. And it's always been true. I said that the Northwest Ordinance, one of our organic or fundamental laws in America, says that religion, morality, and knowledge are necessary to good government and the happiness of mankind. But also the United States, just like Hillsdale College, was founded on the idea of civil and religious liberty. And so it was never the practice that you should run a public school in a way so that a Jew or some other religion wasn't welcomed as an equal citizen. So there's something to this not teaching sectarian religion or dogmatic religion in the schools. My own view is it's taken too far these days, but it's not simply an evil for sure. And the truth is there's an awful lot to know about God that you can just know. And the reason you need to know it, among others, is you need to know what the kinds of beings are. The Declaration of Independence says all men are created equal. Well, that can't be simply true, right? Because everybody's different. Men, women, tall, short, industrious, lazy, different colors. Everybody's different. Everybody's different from everybody else. So in what sense are they equal? And the argument goes in the American Revolution, and the argument is true, that you can see what human equality is when you compare human beings to the other kinds of beings. And that's not even hard to do. Because first of all, I talked about dogs last time. I always talk about dogs. And these dogs are not, that we have in our family, they're not our equals. In some important respects, they're our superiors. But also, none of them is ever going to do any bit of a thing that is automatic to a child. And from the age of 2 or so, a child could even explain what they can do. They can see what kinds of things are. And therefore they can understand how to treat them rightly. I guess I should explain that a little bit. Do you ever think about how it is you're able to talk? We have these words, and these words represent things. And the things themselves are kind of hard to explain. Like, how do you know what a dog is when you see one? They're all so different. And yet we all have a picture in our mind of what a dog is, and every time we see a dog, even a weird-looking dog that we haven't seen that kind before, we always know it's a dog. Same thing with a person. Well, it's not this person or this dog. Dog means dogness, the way, the being of the dog. And we have the ability to perceive that. And that ability is fundamental to what a human being is. Aristotle says that animals use their voices to indicate the pleasure and pain, but we use them to indicate justice and injustice, advantage and disadvantage. Well, justice and injustice, you know, the way you treat a cow and the way you treat a horse and the way you treat a dolphin and the way you treat every kind of being is different, one from another, but especially how you treat all of them in relation to a human being. Because you can eat a cow, and sometimes people do eat people, and in general they're very ashamed about it when they do it, and only dire necessity would make anybody do it. And some people will starve to death before they do it. We know from the Donner Party and the settlement of the Old West got trapped up in the Rockies. There's a diary of a little girl, and she talks, the diary is really interesting, and then she writes a letter to somebody, and she takes some pride, and she's young, in the fact that her family, who lost some members of it, didn't eat any people, she said. Well, that justice depends on knowing kinds of things, right? Well, if there's animals below us, what would be above us? And that's not hard to figure, because all you got to do is look around at the kinds of beings and see that some seem superior to others, we superior to dogs in the way that I was just explaining. So now imagine some being that's got our qualities, our best qualities, but they're perfected. They're taken to the place where they're completely potent. And then everything about us that's imperfect is removed. You get some picture of a divine being. You get an idea of God. God appears 4 times in the Declaration of Independence, always as a very high being, something to emulate if it's possible, something to obey. The Bible says that we are created in the image of God. What can we make of that? Well, the answer is we have these capabilities, and they differentiate us from the other things around them. For example, one of the commands to Adam in the Bible, and this seems to me just like the understanding of the human being of classic philosophy, is that he is given some stewardship over the earth, and that is signified by the fact that he is told to give them names. That is to say, that kind of thing is going to be called this. And none of the animals is given the capability to do that. Well, if you can understand those points, then it does introduce the idea that you might look up to God, and I even believe that even uninstructed, the looking up to God is natural. You look for the more perfect. Everybody loves the good, and the highest form of the good is the beautiful. And so you'd want to get some idea of that in schools. You'd want them to understand that they're a kind of thing, and it's a dignified kind of thing, and there are responsibilities and authorities that go with being that kind of thing, and that also you could imagine a more perfect kind of thing, which would have more perfect responsibilities and more perfect authorities than we have. And I don't think it's illegal to teach that in the schools today, and if it is, it's a shame, even maybe despotism. These virtues of thinking, it means you got to toil. You've got to do your multiplication tables, and you've got to study your phonics so you can learn to read and then get good at reading. And then you've got to develop skills in reasoning. And then you've got to get yourself acquainted right away with the kinds of knowledge there are, I named them, and the most important things you can know about them. And a good school will produce these intellectual qualities in the students. And to do that, the students have to work. School has got to be a big deal. I'm going to tell you at the end a story about a student in one of our charter schools that'll touch you. It does me very much. And you'll see that this young woman very much wants to be at school and very much wants to learn. And if you go into a good classroom, there's excitement. They get tired, of course, and they rather be doing something else sometimes. But every day, for much of the day, there has to be an intensity and an excitement, and everything's got to be organized to get that going on. That means you need help from parents and friends, and the teachers have got to be alert and active and knowledgeable and loving. And that's how you get those virtues, and it just takes time. There isn't any way to do it faster than anybody's ever found. And yet, really great results can be got. Now, in addition to that, the students develop characters. Everybody develops one. And there we get into the world of the moral virtues. And as I said, the classics teach, and I think rightly teach, especially in a book that's my favorite book, Aristotle's Ethics, that the human being is so contrived that they have these two kinds of functioning going on all the time. And there are excellences appropriate to each of the two kinds, and one kind I've been talking about, it's thinking, and the other kind is acting and morality and virtues of character. Because the claim is we have these bodies, and we feel our pleasures and our pains, and yet we have this conscience outside that, a sense of right, which comes from an ability to perceive the being and rightness for each thing. And so those things are both operating, and you have to develop the excellences of character. That word character is a really great word because it comes from a Greek word, choresein, that means to etch or engrave. And just think about that word for a minute. You know, you can make a mark with a pencil on something, and you can just make a little mark. But if you're going to etch into something, you've got to do it repeatedly. And you've got to change its shape some. It's like this, you know. You've got to... You know, I'm pressing myself here with my fingernail, such a one as I have, and I can feel it. I can even touch my bones. Imagine something that goes deeper than that and gets right inside you. And of course, that takes time and repetition. And your character is indelible. It's something about you that won't change. Aristotle teaches that a really great character, which is rare, is the kind of character that becomes incapable of taking pleasure in anything improper. is not tempted anymore. And he says a vicious character, and there are some of those, but those are rare too. They have etched into themselves by repeated operation habits of cravenness and wanting the wrong thing, and ignoring the voice inside themselves that tells them what's good, that they are now trapped. A really strong, great character of a good kind and a really bad character of a bad kind. If you ever develop those, you're gone. And you develop your character, Aristotle says, by making 1,000 choices and then 1,000 more. And we all do that all the time. We always want something, or think something, or feel some pressure or some fear. And there's a voice in us telling us not to do the wrong thing here, even at our cost. And if we do that over and over and over and over and over again, and we do it rightly, we'll develop a really great character. Aristotle even says that most of us have pretty good characters. Few of us have really great characters. But happiness is very driven by whether you get that really great one. The happiest people have that. And even in the classics, who are pagans, right, before Jesus, they think that that character leads you to pay attention to God. So the young need to be working on that. He says they can't really get it fully developed while they're young, but it starts there. It starts in habit, and then it proceeds through choice. And remember about this, that it's very much in you, you see, because you can be made to do the right thing over and over again, but until you do it, it doesn't really change your character all that much, because it starts in you. And by the way, there's a great fact about human freedom in that. So in a school, discipline is not meant to make them do things as much as it's meant to get them to do them to do them. And that does involve some forming of habit, like you start out by teaching them to line up and raise their hand and sit up straight and all kinds of things like that. I was in one of our best charter schools not long ago, and I was in the kindergarten class, and that seems to be an amazing art to teach kindergarten. And she had an expression, stack your blocks, she says. And your blocks are like this bit of you and this bit of you and this bit of you. And so when she says that, they all reach up here like they're pulling an imaginary string, and they pull themselves, and they all get tall. And then she has phrases like that. She says, sit near your desk, comfortably and close. And you know, in modern education, by the way, we treat that kind of thing like we're bossing the students too much, right? And now education is supposed to be student-centered, is a great catchword or buzzword in education. That is, it's all about the student. Come to find out, it actually isn't all about the student. The student is an end and must be treated as a self-actuated being. But of course, it's about the good. It's about the things to know. It's about the behaviors that make a student, a human being, happy. And so that kindergarten teacher, what she achieved, I watched her do it, was she got everybody paying attention, and then they were all participating and working on something that they couldn't figure out for themselves. But now that they know that, they can go on to the next thing. And the next thing you know, they'll be as qualified as that teacher. And she's marvelous, by the way. She was in the Leander School in Austin, Texas. In case she watches this, you should know that she should know that somebody observed her and thought she was great. The next thing you know, they'll be up there capable of doing anything she can do. And she learned to do what she can do by discipline and by work and by getting inside herself the thing that comes out and emanates to the world. It's not hard to list the, well, I'll list if you want me to, the intellectual virtues. There are a bunch of them, but they break down into two main groups. Knowledge of things that never change, which accumulates to wisdom, and knowledge of things that change all the time. And we have to have that second kind of knowledge. It's called prudence or practical judgment, because we have to choose all the time. And it may be that we're serving conceptions of right that are eternal, but they're always presented to us in circumstances that change all the time. And one of the ways you learn that virtue, and you should learn it in school, is to study people who've made important choices. Risky choices, big choices. Statesmen are good to study for this reason, especially the great ones. Ordinary statesmen are more ordinary. But they make big choices, right? And you should study how they made them and what all the factors were. And that way you can apply these things, these criteria they use, and they change all the time. But there's a pattern and a rhythm to them, and you learn it that way. Whereas the eternal things, the way you study them, is you contemplate them. You gather facts about them, and you meditate and ruminate and figure on those facts for a long time, and that can accumulate to wisdom. The virtues of character are also several, but they break down into, they start with two main ones. There's that old list, you know, the cardinal virtues, and they are, one of them is intellectual, and three of them are moral in their nature. The intellectual one is wisdom, which stands both for wisdom and for practical wisdom, or practical judgment, or prudence. And the intellectual ones start with courage, a hard virtue, an important virtue. And it's easy to know what courage is. It's just the right disposition toward danger and pain. Nobody is likely to be guilty of seeking danger and pain for their own sake, but you actually have to have some critical distance from them, because if you don't, you'll be a coward, and that's a terrible thing to be. To have courage, you have to sense the danger. Nobody likes pain. Nobody likes to be killed. But great things are done by people who can suffer. And even education, even learning, like I tell students a lot because I used to feel it myself. And if you come to this college, especially at the beginning, it's like drinking from a fire hose. Because all of a sudden it's, you know, there's just a lot of people around who are smart and hardworking, and then there's a bunch of teachers standing up there, and Lord, do they not know everything. So it seems, you know, because they got 30 years on you, and they're pretty good, and they've been developing for a long time. And so what happens, there's some students in this room, and they're all smiling and nodding their heads right now, because they've all gone through it, just like I've gone through it in my life, right? And so now it gets toward the end of the term, and it's overwhelming. And you think you are going to fail. You can't do it. And then how shameful is that? And you're afraid. And what you have to do is get control of that. You have to say, I can't learn everything that there is to be learned ever, and I can't even learn everything that's to be learned in this term right now. But I can learn this thing, and then I can learn the next thing, and then I can learn the next thing. And I have to forget about shame and fear and being overwhelmed, and I got to do the work. A student needs courage. Everybody does, in every job. Most vivid examples, of course, are on the battlefield, and there are many of them there. But it's in our ordinary lives. And the second of the moral virtues is the opposite, and also easy to understand. It's called temperance or moderation. And that's the right disposition toward pleasure. We all want stuff and need stuff. And a lot of the stuff that we want and need is very pleasant. And so, you know, like you're watching this course, and there's really cool stuff on TV. Sometimes I wonder why you're doing it. And thank you for doing it. And it's an act of moderation, of discipline toward pleasure, you know, unless you're one of those strange people like myself who just enjoys this kind of thing. And you have to have that moderation. Everybody does, especially little kids. They're just a bundle of wants. And they don't understand why they can't have everything they want. And you have to teach them that they should want the things that are good for them and not the other things, and they should give priority. It doesn't mean you can't do. You don't have to. You can't, and you don't have to do the highest things all the time. Aristotle, for example, didn't like sleep. He thought by the way, I encourage everybody watching this to get enough sleep, especially the young. But I will tell you this story about Aristotle. He thought that there was the least difference between a good man and a bad man when they were asleep. And so he tried not to sleep a lot. And one thing he did, there's some record of it from one of his students, is that he would hold a brass ball in his hand and have a metal plate down below, and he would work. And when he'd fall asleep, it would fall and wake him up. But of course, the brass ball is the symbol of the universe in the Greek thinking, in some of the works. And so the brass ball was keeping Aristotle awake. So now a good school, by the way, it will teach the beginnings of these intellectual virtues and these virtues of character. And one of the signs that these virtues of that we are human and self-actuated beings is that you can learn both the intellectual virtues and the virtues of character by being told what they are. I notice I teach from time to time here Aristotle's Ethics, which is a very great book. And one of the most talented students I ever had, a young man who's a distinguished lawyer now, he got all fired up reading this, and he was a fine young man, and he was 20 years old, 21 years old when he was taking this class, and he's probably 26 or 7 now. And I still have contact with him all the time. Delightful thing about college life. And he got all fired up, and he was sitting at the desk like this, and he's got his elbows on the table, and his hands are clenched by his side of his face. And you know, in class, you notice their body language, and you know if they're skeptical, you know if they agree, you know if they're puzzled, and you can call on them because of their face. Well, this particular young man is going like this. Said, "What is it?" He said, I'll remember it till the day I die. He said, "This is stupid, but I'm going to say it. How can we do this?" Because Aristotle is describing the operations of a most excellent kind of human being. And this boy wants to be that kind of being. He's becoming that kind of being very much. And I said, well, we'll turn to book 5, and we went to a certain paragraph. And I said, just read that. And Aristotle gives the answer. You are what you do. You spend your time trying to develop those things. And since it's in you, you have to tell them what those things are. And human beings naturally want those things. A good school will teach those things. That will lead them to what I described in the last lecture as a capacity to gather ultimate knowledge. And the divide between the basic knowledge and the ultimate knowledge is not strict. There's some of both in each. It's one of the reasons I fancy, I've always wondered about this. Do you notice how we describe the same things, same kinds of things as deep and as high? Something is profound, which means down by the foundation, or something is elevated. And often the same things. Well, that's foundational. Well, that's the ultimate purpose. Well, come to find out, basic education and ultimate education have a very great deal to do with each other. And they need to know what it is. I'm going to close by telling you a couple of stories about these 8 schools. They're very fun. We've started one in Leander, Texas, north of Austin. And it's run by the most important young academic in America today, Kathleen Arn O'Toole, my daughter, recently married. And I went down there one day and walked around the school, helped her teach her class with her husband, Daniel O'Toole, very educated young man about to get his PhD. My daughter has one. And it's just fun. The kids are ebullient, naughty, and serious, in alternation, of course. She has 480 kids in the school, and they just had re-enrollment. And they have one student not returning next year. Next year, they're going to have 53 places for new students, and they have 760 applicants. And this is a suburb of Austin where the schools are pretty good. Everybody, like in all of our charter schools, everyone is learning Latin. Latin's not easy. Why would you do that? The discipline it gives you. the window it opens into the classical world, the foundation of our own language and others. All are heavily affected in the West by Latin and Greek. It's a tremendous thing, and of course, since the human gift is talking, to learn to talk in one of those foundational languages is a great gift. She told me she taught the 2nd grade for an afternoon, and she's an excellent teacher. I've been in her classes. She's been a college professor. And she said they had a substitute who got ill too, and they had a bunch of training going on, and there wasn't anybody to teach the 2nd grade that afternoon. So she said, well, you take the morning and I'll take the afternoon. And she said she was actually unable to get through it, because there's an art to that, because every slightly humorous thing leads to major disruption. And there's a couple of kids in there that she adores, she pointed out to me, and they're very naughty. And so she couldn't handle it. And so finally she said, Dad, I failed. I went and got somebody to help me. I said, well, it's a special skill, my dear, I guess, because I'm confident that I could not do it. There's a great school in Louisville that's getting high marks in everything now that they're old enough to take the standardized test. The one in New Mexico is the same. The one in Bentonville, Arkansas, after 3 years, I think, is one of the most highly rated schools in Arkansas. I'll close with this story. There's one in Savannah, Georgia. I'm particularly fond of it. It's in the inner city. It's run by an inspiring man named Ben Payne. They're wearing their uniforms and learning their Latin. It operates in a school that's been refurbished, and it happens Clarence Thomas went to school for high school, I think, for 2 years in that school building. That's a nice story. And these are inner city kids, and there's lots of trouble there. First year, they lost 30 students in the first 3 months. This year, 3. They have a big wait list, and there are increasing signs of excellence. It is an inspiring place to go. I heard a story the other day from the headmaster, Mr. Payne. A social worker for the government came by and mentioned that a little girl's mother was missing. Did he know anything about it? He said he didn't. The social worker talked to the girl, and then Mr. Payne talked to the girl and said, is your mother gone? And the little girl said, yes. And he said, this little girl is 12. He said, how long has she been gone? And the little girl said, a week. The little girl's been home alone for a week, and dressing herself and feeding herself. And Ben, who's very close to the kids there, I spent some time down there. My favorite thing to do, by the way, is to eat in a dining hall full of students. I get to do it here all the time. It's the best restaurant I've ever been in. And this one, you know, we had hot dogs and beans, and it was fantastic. You sit with them, they're so alive. They want to know all about you. You know, to them, you're kind of a weird-looking thing. And what kind of thing is that? Is the sort of questions at any age that they're asking. What do you do? Where do you come from? Why are you here? What's that like? You know, and they're you know, sitting at a table. These kids in Savannah they writhe a lot. The young ones all writhe. I once used to say to my wife, it's like having dinner with a bucket of snakes, and they're all wiggling around. You know, and they want to. You know, they're all going like this. They all want to say next, right? And at the same time as they're going like this, they're blurting out what they want to say. I just noticed how good Ben and the teachers there are with these kids. So he called the little girl in and asked him that and found that out. And he said, you know, Sarah, whenever you have trouble, you have to tell us. Why didn't you tell me? And she said, I was afraid I couldn't come to school. So I want you to know that at the college here, the excellence in those schools, we don't think we make it any more than the achievements of our students. We can help them to the extent and only to the extent that we've gone about the business of making those same excellences in ourselves. And we're deficient in that, but we're working on it all the time and have been for a long time. And so I admire stories like that very much. Those are stories of excellence and of salvation. And I believe that those stories are as every bit as possible as they ever have been in America. Every bit as possible wherever there are human beings. And all you got to do is go about it the right way. And that is in our power to do. And I do so hope and pray that we will do it generally. Thank you for watching.